The last 72 hours in crypto has been an absolutely wild ride. Firstly, up $5,000 after Jerome Powell flipped from saying that there was economic risks and no rate cuts to the following day saying that we had the potential of rate cuts in September based on the economic data he is now seeing. Strange how things happen in 24 hours. But again, what we saw from Bitcoin was a pump up of $5,000 and then all of the gains given back over the weekend, crashing down to 110 all the way through to our 50% level at 111. Now, the close has been relatively good. We're seeing reasonable signs here for Ethereum also hitting new fresh all-time highs, coming into the weekly close slightly under the old all-time high price, but it doesn't look like things are going to slow down longer term, even if we're seeing short-term signs of consolidation through Q3. As always, lots to cover. It's your home of macro cycle analysis. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Bitcoin did hit that 110,000 level, closing now at $113,000. So this is still looking good longer term, even though we've seen the market flush out the positive news one day and then basically giving all of the gains plus some back to the market just in the last few hours. Now, the concern we had with this period for Bitcoin leading into this final leg, this final stage, I think, of the cryptocurrency cycle is whether we see an overbalance in time and price. Now, what that means is, are the bears taking control at this stage, or are the bulls still in control? And we measure that by looking at how long in time is the correction and how big is the correction in price. So if we get an overbalance, basically the scales swinging further in one direction using a significant measuring point like we have just here in May through to June, then that gives us an early warning sign that the cycle could be coming to an end. But as I'll show, at least from the analysis that I'm looking at and how I'm playing the market, you do you, I don't think that's the case thus far because we haven't seen those signs play out. But it's important to keep those on the chart and to see those so that we can get the early warning signs should things change. For now, reasonable things happening here for Bitcoin, still underneath the 7-year resistance line, which is this diagonal overhead, but still above the 50%. So that's why I'm still calling this period, this Q3 period in 2025, the consolidation for Bitcoin, and we're beginning to see some further signs that Ethereum and altcoins eventually will take the lead, even if they pull back in the short term. Now, in the short term, we saw interest rates jump, the probabilities of there being no cut up to 25%, of course, from Powell's discussion at the weekend at the Jackson Hole Symposium in Wyoming, looking at the potential to cut rates, which has now brought the probabilities back this way towards 84% of a cut this year. Overall, there still looks like the market is pricing in 2 cuts for 2025 and further cuts in 2026. And that still leads to positive signs long-term for the bulls. Even when we saw interest rates increase, that was still positive signs for the bulls because we're still in a long-term uptrend. We're still looking at the 18-year cycle coming to a peak sometime around 2026. So we haven't seen any of the signals yet, the final signals, I should say, that this market is ready to break down. Now, some of the indicators are showing that the house of cards is going to come crashing down, as it inevitably does every single cycle, but we're not there yet, which is a good sign for the bull market. But this is where things get a little bit trickier leading into that peak. As we lead into the peak, we're probably going to get some cuts, but it hasn't been anywhere near as many cuts as the market was hoping for last year. They're looking for cuts all the way down below 3% by now. And of course, the interest rate is still at 4.5%, with the hopes of it coming down to 4.25%. Now, that's still good for the bulls. You can see the data here. When the Fed cuts near all-time highs, the bulls love it. S&P 500 returns after the Fed cuts within 2% of an all-time high, possibly an arbitrary number here, looking at where this cut potentially comes in towards a high, because that's going to be next month. But the data suggests an average increase over the next 12 months from that point, so September to September, looking roughly around 14% with a median of 10%, but there is a 100% hit rate that the market is going to be higher. This is the S&P 500 is going to be higher 12 months later, 100%. Now, shorter term here, 6%, could be a little down there at 72% and 77% for the 3 months ahead. But nonetheless, there is a pretty good hit rate that we're going to see higher prices. And I think that's going to be the case because we're getting very close to this all-time high for the real estate cycle and the economy, which lead, and then the stock market peaks after that point, which is why this seems pretty plausible that we would see higher prices. So that's going to be also good stuff here for BTC. Now, the shorter term, we just had the Jackson Hole. When I'm talking short term, I'm talking in this quarter 3. And each of the last 6 years through this period, you can see that the S&P 500 has used this time to consolidate. In some cases, it is larger, so a larger correction through a longer term consolidation. And that was a huge opportunity there in 2022, like we talked about on the channel, being part of a higher low forming before the market was taking off. And now that the market's up longer, we had a pretty significant correction here. I think we're going through something like a 5-year cyclical repeat. And this period is basically what we're tracking on our S&P, and then how that's going to relate to Bitcoin and cryptos, we will also have a look at. So Ethereum is the next one that has been doing very well. It's up now 19 weeks into a new all-time high. The numbers here are looking at time frames that ETH over this cycle has taken to hit a top and then correct. Now, the correction is most likely going to be less than what we've seen through the previous cycles here, unless we just basically shoot straight up and the markets take off into probably one of their final peaks. Could be the second last, could be the last, but nonetheless, the time frames here are coming to a head, and we were at 137 days from the low. The last one was 133 days, correction, lower high, correction, 152 days, 158 days, and then that was just the first range out at 57 days. Now, the corrections also had pretty similar time frames to the downside, and that's one reason why I don't necessarily expect it to be the same time frame to the downside here, because of the macro cycle where we sit longer term, meaning that we'd probably see a shorter term correction here, something less than what we've seen here at 146 days of a correction, 179 days of correction, 114 days for a correction here for Ethereum. We'd start to look at something like a 50% in time. So divide these by 2, that would be our next target once a top comes in. But overall, looking very bullish, as it has now put in a new all-time high and attempts to consolidate the gains. And that is above the previous highs of this cycle, around 4,000 to 4,100. And we've got that at the moment. So from this top, if we see any sort of corrections like it has done in the past, 17% would take us down to those previous highs at 4,100, and then we could see some wicks down to the 20s, 25%, being $3,700. But on a closing basis, for the bull market, you'd expect this to close higher and close above the 4,100 level. So of course, markets can wick down, but you want to see them close back above the previous resistance so that it then becomes support. So at the moment, everything looking pretty good for Ethereum. Our weekly reports this week will be looking at the economy, Bitcoin, and altcoins. Last week we covered Ethereum, and that's been going very well. If you want to get those reports delivered to your inbox along with $100 off premium, link is in the top of the video description, tiacrypto.com/subscribe. Timeframes to the end of the cycle are still looking relatively on track. Some are looking at shorter term timeframes to the peak, others slightly extended. I'm still unsure whether we would run into that Q1 of 2026, but we've got to keep all options open because the market doesn't give any guarantees. That's kind of the issue, and the only way to remain in the market is to have your signals. Are we seeing significant breakdowns which would then invalidate that move higher, or are we not? And it's very simple. If we're not, stay in the trade. If we are, get out of the trade, or begin to reduce that position. At least do the very least there. And so that's how you navigate the markets, or how we begin to navigate the markets to get to that all-time high. We haven't seen the breakdowns yet. The timeframes are beginning to run out, but there are still signs that there is stronger moves to go for the altcoins and potentially Bitcoin, because we haven't seen any of the breakdown signals yet. In terms of the timeframes to the top, looking at previous cycles, 163 weeks was cycle 1 into the top of 2013. So 163 weeks on the chart brings us to quarter 1 of 2026. Quite a long way out here. Basically the first week of January 2026. Now, if we happen to go shorter than that, like previous cycles here, 152 weeks, then that brings us back to a top in late October. And that also lines up with the higher low after a breakout of an all-time high into the final top. So basically the market ran out, broke out of the high, pulled back, and then how long does it take to get into that final top from that pullback low? So a significant turning point. The last 2 cycles took about 22 weeks and 20 weeks. So this is the pullback, that's the final top. This is the pullback, that's the final top. This is the pullback, and I'm using this as the breakout because that was basically the clean breakout and then into your significant low. This was a significant low in April. It was the tariff drama. And then 22 weeks from what we could see in the last ones, we got 20 and 22. 22 takes us to the second week of September. So 3 weeks. It seems unlikely at this rate that that's going to be the final top, but it could be a local top there if this market gets running. I'm more willing to look at the longer timeframes out here, somewhere in the middle between these 2 cycles that are about 2022, so roughly around 21 there, and this cycle here, you got 32 weeks from this low. So something average there gives you about 26, 27 weeks. That would take us very close to that peak in late October as well. Now, there's still a few timeframes being thrown around for the end of the cycle, but for now, the way I'm playing it is watching each of them on the way up. And as we discussed, if the market hasn't broken down according to our other signals, then we have to keep running with the trend, and we're looking to that next time target to the upside. So institutions still buying up a ton of Ethereum treasuries. We're seeing it now with ETH versus Bitcoin, which has also begun to outperform, or is now outperforming Bitcoin for 2025, which was part of my forecasts for 2025. S&P to hit 6,700, Ethereum to outperform Bitcoin, ETH BTC to close the year higher. It's very, very close there. I don't think ETH is going to break the 9% barrier for this cycle. And of course, Dow Jones and NASDAQ also to close much, much higher. We're also seeing that with the commodities closing higher, and Bitcoin to hit at least 122,025, possibly 144. So over the last couple of days, with Bitcoin pulling back, Ethereum BTC has outperformed. That's broken above the 4% and now have a few days close above that 4% level as well. I was looking at this to consolidate, but Bitcoin has now continued to consolidate itself. And you can see the strength in the background here for Ethereum holding these gains while Bitcoin's price is down, the USD price is down. ETH is now outperforming Bitcoin on that particular pairing, which is a good sign for this bull market. And like we looked at with the dominance, you can see that it has now broken down. We got the overbalance in time of price, which is a positive for the altcoin season. These are all these little pieces are starting to fall into place. Big breakdown here. Longer time to the downside for the dominance, and bigger losses here in price as well. Now we look back to the next overbalance in time and price, which was from the low of 2022. And this essentially just shows, can the market begin to boom from this point, get that larger altcoin season that everyone is waiting for. So what does that look like on the chart? That's the period that we're now tracking. This one is complete, so we can get rid of that one off the chart. And look at the next overbalance in time and price, which comes out at 56%. So if Bitcoin dominance can now drop to 56%, it would be the largest correction since ETH bottomed in June 2022, which bottomed earlier than Bitcoin. and then took off at that point. So that's the next target price that we're looking for. But of course, the interest has to come back. As you can see here for Google Trends, altcoin search term has died off significantly, but Ethereum has taken over. So the yellow line here is Ethereum search volume really picking up. Of course, the last week and a half, it's died off. Crypto's died off. Bitcoin's died off as well. And yeah, obviously altcoins also got absolutely crushed, but for now, it's putting in higher prices or higher search volume than what it has done in the past. So we got 12 months here. Altcoins were down at 3 on their search when compared to the most recent peak here of 100. And then prior to that as well, their low point was 3. The current low point is 9. So provided it continues to hold at least 3 to 4, ideally put in a higher low, the search interest is there. More people are searching altcoins. And once it all comes back, I think especially with your Bitcoin dominance, if this does continue to slide, then you're going to see more and more fireworks coming to the space, especially for those stronger alts, the larger alts, things that are actually moving when compared to Bitcoin, as I have a look at in just a moment as well. So all positive signs for the longer term of this bull market, which leads me to think we're probably going to go on that little bit longer. But of course, we're still watching that Q3 timeframe. This is the consolidation. This is the resetting. The charts are showing it. You can see it just here, the cooling off in terms of the search volume. We've seen it on the price of Bitcoin also continuing to reset after power got dovish, all the gains given back. We're seeing it reset as well with the exchange volume. So higher lows, slightly lower highs. Exchange volume sitting at 62 billion. So there is still very much a lot of interest in terms of trading. And the liquidations also up at $600 million for the last 24 hours. So although there's still lots of liquidations, the exchange volume is still high. Therefore, there is still more money coming into the space. You can see these last few days, the longs got smashed a couple of days ago when when power got dovish, the shorts got smashed. So now we've done the flip here. All the leverage to the upside, the squeeze, and now the leverage as the market went down, those longs got squeezed out of the market. And on that note, leverage getting squeezed out of the market continuously is a good thing for the cycle to continue on, especially if the structure remains intact, which is what we continue to cover here. The cycle structure is still there. There are still strong signs that the bears are not in control for the long term. Now, the Bitcoin cycle is still looking very, very good. We're looking at the 5 and the 10-year combined. We've seen the pullbacks here. August, it to me is still going on. We've still got the consolidation according to the chart as well. And that period can last into September, coming up to that interest rate announcement. Now, after this consolidation of Q3, markets get a little bit clearer and we start to see that run to higher prices. Now, it seems strange that everyone knows this. This is data that's out there. People pull it apart and talk about it time and time again. But it's the fact that it keeps rhyming year after year that makes it so valuable to use. So if you can put this into your tool belts for your trading, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's altcoins, whether it's the stock market, stocks, then I think that still gives you a leg up on the markets because the rhyming keeps going. And for those who just follow the news headlines or the fundamentals, something's always changing there to not let them see how the cycles keep repeating. And again, it's just basically repeated almost to a T here with the pullback into Q1. Of course, it's a week or two into Q2. The market rallied from that point. Now we're in the consolidation phase again. Things are in the background. Looks like we're going to go higher, but first we need to clear out the uncertainty. And that's also showing up in the crowded market report. The commercials are heavily short while the large speculators were long. The idea here is you want to not be doing what the large speculators are doing. You want to be doing more often than not what the commercials are doing. The commercials are short, not saying you have to get short. You could just be not in the market trying to get all the last gains because of the price that's already escalated so far. You know, the Ethereum price has been skyrocketing. The commercials have said probably looking at some sort of top around these prices, and the longs or the large speculators have continued to get further long as the top runs up. Now they were short as the price was running up through May, June, and July, which was basically the bulk of the gains. And now they're getting long towards the top. And you can look back time and time again. They do it here. They do it here. This was late quarter 4, 2023. And then they all decide to get short while the price is running up into that January, February, March top. And then it all sort of goes dead towards those peaks. So again, another sign that I think things are resetting. Just need to get that balance back into the market. We're seeing it on the USDT dominance as well. So basically the whole show is suggesting consolidation. Yeah, we're going to see some news headlines, Ethereum hitting new all-time highs, but longer term, it seems like there still needs to be a bit more consolidation. Stablecoins are still holding their ground here above 4.1%. So as this continues here, we're just going to see the markets grind around, some of that money flow out to ETH, some into some of the stronger alts. Maybe it's going to come back off Bitcoin and go into those stronger altcoins. If we see the stablecoin dominance rise up towards this resistance level, then we're going to see a larger pullback for Ethereum and those stronger alts that have been making this later run. Now, if this goes down and breaks 4%, that gives us that nice room to move towards 4 and 3.7%. So that's that 4.1%. A breakdown here, that's going to see more of the money flow out into the stronger alts and into Bitcoin. Now, a breakdown of 3.7, that's where that huge final wave or second or third final wave of this hopium bull market gets absolutely hysterical. A breakdown of 3.7 into this range of 2.5%. Lots and lots of money to go out into altcoins. And overall, it's trying to do it. This is the altcoin chart. Others dominance, so everything excluding the top 10. And it keeps putting in higher lows. It keeps trying to close above 7.8%. That was this low here in February. And that's the resistance line there. So it's attempting the higher lows here. There's your triangle pattern to hopefully push higher and get to 8.8, which essentially is more money flowing into other altcoins besides the top 10 there. Of course, it's probably going to flow into the top 10 as well. If it can get above 10%, 10 to 10.5%, that is going to be the mega altcoin season, which would likely, I think, coincide with the stablecoin dominance breaking down below 3.7%. It's going to need a massive, massive push for this others dominance to get above that key resistance level. And that's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like a altcoin season of 2021 or an altcoin season of 2017. So far this cycle, it's just been nothing. It's been very, very small, short-lived altcoin seasons. Now, the total 3 market caps, so this just excludes Bitcoin and ETH. It includes the largest caps as well. This is showing strength. So essentially, we're seeing that strength move from Bitcoin into now ETH, and we're starting to see it with the top 10 altcoins. This is the strength here, as you can see, holding above 900 billion, getting close to breaking out of those tops again at 1.1 trillion, and the previous top there at 1.16 trillion. And throw into the mix here that previous old all-time high of 1.13. So you're starting to see that rotation of money going from Bitcoin to ETH to the top 10. And then these are the ones outside of the top 10. So although it's much, much lower, obviously a lot weaker at this point, it just takes a little bit of that money to go up, because this is basically 10% of the market, 7.8, 8%. And the top 10 cryptos, altcoins, stablecoins are like 90% of the money in cryptocurrency. So if even a little bit of that can flow out into the others, that should send it skyrocketing towards that 10, 10.5, and it needs to get above 10, 10.5 for one of these mega altcoin seasons to happen. The stronger alts are getting a little bit of a room to run here. Before I keep going, we've got the reports coming out this week, link in the top of the video description right there, and $100 off premium if you want to learn how to trade and long-term invest. Set yourself up financially for that next stage of the cycle. So with Solana BTC, we've finally had a daily close above the 50% level here, 0.0018. So some strength coming back to Solana versus Bitcoin at this stage of the cycle. Remember the timing we looked at already in the video. I'll keep coming back to that in future videos. So make sure you're subscribed. Now the strength is looking good. You're seeing some more strength here for XRP over the last couple of days, holding its ground here to 2,400 Satoshis. Sui also had a couple of good days up and closed above the major 50% for a couple of days. Still needs to do a bit of work here to get above all the previous resistance and the 50% level at 3,900 Satoshis. But nonetheless, they are looking relatively good here. Sol US dollar, which is what most people are concerned with, volumes increasing on the move higher, getting a test of the 210 level that we've been watching. That was the previous cycle top, and then the support breakdown. We got a retest and failure, and then the last couple of months we've seen rejections at 210. So I think this is going to be a really key area for Solana now that it's above the 50%. Consolidate here, much easier room to run to get to that 295, hopefully break it and get to the $300 level. And for the US dollars for XRP, still holding out well above the 50%, consolidating here at a slightly higher low. 340 is a very strong resistance so far. There is a rejection at 334, rejection 336, rejection 331, and then of course the all-time high at 366. So for a round number, breaks above 340, set your alerts. That could be some really big things there for XRP. And SUI also closing above 50% on the USD with the gaining of Bitcoin value here for SUI. So towards the end of the cycle, things are looking relatively good here for some of these stronger alts. You can name your stronger alts down below. Maybe you're looking at hype with the higher lows, some resistance going on here at the moment, but that to hopefully follow through in the longer term for hype as well. But I'll leave it there for today's video and come back to the traditional finance in tomorrow's video. Things are looking relatively good here as well for the S&P, for the NASDAQ, which of course is probably going to flow through to Bitcoin and the altcoins as well as they also climb a little higher. Big things here for the home builders ETF as well. So stay tuned, hit the like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys back here at the next video. Don't forget the reports coming out over this week. Cheers, guys.